Good evening. Today we are talking about the number of political parties in Zimbabwe. ZEC has reported that 107 parties, political parties, are registered for this year's election. What do you make of that? A small country with 107 political parties. Is there something that I'm missing? Or is there something that we are not getting right? What is your take? Political parties, each one set up with the sole intention to constitute the next government. If this was coming from you would say gods must be crazy. 107 political parties. Just imagine. This is Zim. 107 parties. Let's try to invite people. So 105. How are you, Finley? Good evening. We are talking about the Zimbabwe that we are trying to understand. We know from ZEC that Zimbabwe now has the total of 107 political parties. What do you make of that? Toko, what do you make of this story in Zimbabwe? 107 political parties. You think there is merit in people organizing themselves into political parties? And each one believing that in that race they will form the next government. What is it about ego that allows people to hallucinate, pontificate, and sometimes imagine? Why is politics so sexy, so interesting? Good evening, Ramai, welcome. Why is politics this interesting that it will attract like meat so many flies? Lori, Mufoni, welcome. Manuel, Bamanaka, Moses, welcome. Why is politics so interesting that everyone wants to be a president? Is there something that we are missing? Ramai says narcissistic behavior. Sabelo Shongwe, it's becoming a reality in Zimbabwe whereby political parties will be more than the voters. And imagine the voters, the ballot, to read like a textbook. How many are they, though? 107. All registered. Each one with a president. Each one with an executive. Each one established to form the next government of the Republic of Zimbabwe. If this republic was well-to-do, was not bankrupt, was not a failed state, one would understand why it's so lucrative. But hang on, those who have been in government have not fared badly, though. Some have seen their financial fortunes catapulted into another stratosphere. Most people who have joined politics actually have not regretted. They have done so, and they have benefited from doing so. So the politics of Zimbabwe has it got anything to do with public service or self-service? Is it ultimately only to lose it through electoral mischief? Who would do that? Can you imagine the havoc, the highway to state power, how crowded it is, even by people who know fully well that they are going nowhere slowly? And who would finance in his or right mind this kind of project? Who will finance this? I don't know whether Tendai, you would finance it, Rama, you would finance it, Manuel Moses says, I think it has something to do with self-service. A lot of people have been heartbroken, some lose property and some cash through our former president. It's like they want to compensate. Kungoda kunzi datongawo. And Rama patriotism is hard to define in Zimbabwe. It's like a self-service under the guise of public service. That would be somebody's reading. But ask yourself, you are the voter. and you ask a person, why do you want to be a president when the country that you want to lead and the people that you want to lead have been battered? Their opportunities were squandered or are being squandered. Why would you want to be a president? Is it necessary that you all come into the fray and say, if it's not me, then who? What is it about Zimbabwe that attracts people into public service, and yet actually the service that people get is not worth it? Hello, Pearl. Good morning or good afternoon to you. We are talking about political parties. It's now a common secret that a total of 107 parties have been registered or are registered. Fine, Pearl. Perhaps you can add your 2 cents to the question. Why is it that a bankrupt country like Zimbabwe would be so interesting, so sexy to attract 107 suitors? How is it that a country that has seen a lot of lives squandered would find itself being so attractive? Imagine you are a woman and there are 107 people who want to marry you. This is Zimbabwe. 107. We do not have a law for registration of political parties. I just need to make a clarity there. A party is a body corporate, so it must have a constitution. It must have office bearers. It must have members. And Pearl, you are correct. Imagine the ballot paper itself. It will have to be like a book. Even developed countries have not found a way of attracting even 5 major political parties. They are just associations in Mawariri. That right to associate, and you proceed to associate in the belief that when you associate, you want to be in government. What is so interesting about being in government that we don't know, yet the reality is that there are many people conspiring to be in government by whatever means necessary. There are many people who find that there's nothing more exciting, more igniting than being involved in politics. When you look at the return on investment from politics, you find there's something missing. Actually, there's something missing in the arithmetic. You give up your time, you give up everything you have so that you can join a political party, lead a political party. Why is it that this behavior, after 38 years of so-called independence, it's so entrenched, so crystallized, that anyone who is angry wants to be an MP. Anyone who is angry wants to be a president. Surely some could amalgamate if they have similar beliefs. So, is it a value-centric, creed-centric, or affinity-centric? Just someone wakes up at night and says, I want to be a politician. Just look at it. I wake up, sometimes broke, with nothing, and I say, hang on, I want to be in government. Because Mugabe has made government so exciting, so sexy, that some people will not have married you unless you were a president. And being a president made somebody attractive, somebody sexy. This is the challenge that we face. The challenge we face is that people want to be politicians. But this is an important issue. It is all about individual interests. With no source of employment, people think that the only source of livelihood is politics. People are eyeing the state's resources. They are saying that if Mugabe could do it for 37 years, why can't I do it? Surely Mugabe never paid rent for 37 years. I think now 38 years. So if you can live without paying rent, if when you become a minister, everybody looks up to you, you become a pop star, simply because you are now a minister in government, a president of the republic. Can you imagine this conundrum? 107 men looking for one woman. There is only one vacancy to be filled of the president, and yet so many want to get into this office. What is so special about this office? Is it because it's rent-free? Is it because you get food for free? Is it best because you get gas for free? You never get robbed? What is it about this office? It ought to be a public office, yet in reality, it's not a public office. So what is it about this office that lends itself to attract men and women who are not prepared even to swallow any ego, any pride, but they want to be at the top of the food chain? Game of Thrones, Toko Mango says, is it a game, or there's some rationality in this selection? Why would people voluntarily associate themselves with others and they form a political party? What is it? What is it about politics? What is it about the business of the people that would attract these retail operators to associate themselves into these formations for the sole purpose of robbing your pocket, for the sole purpose of getting supply chain control, for the sole purpose of public purchases to be under your belt. Some have become career MPs. Once elected, they will never visit their constituencies and will pop up when the next election is in the vicinity. Indeed, how many people, I've been approached by many who want to be president, MP, and you ask them, why are you so interested? You don't get any valid answer, any justifiable answer, any legitimate answer. It's missing in action. But evidently, there is something about politics that we need to interrogate. Why would people want your vote when they don't know what to do with the power that they then assume because you choose to be blind? What is it about civics that we actually don't know what the rights and duties of citizenship are or ought to be? What is it about public power that would get us? Good day, Grace. We are talking about Zimbabwe, your country, Grace. 107 parties, political parties. Some don't even have an office, they meet under a tree. They want to be in government at all costs. They are not prepared to see a Zimbabwe in which they just mind their own businesses, just focus on their lanes, just focus on being the best they can be. But they are saying that we are not complete without your vote. So vote for me, trust me, but never verify. What has Zimbabwe surrendered to after 38 years of so-called independence? Shouldn't we interrogate the idea of independence that would produce a harvest of 107 institutions determined to collapse into one person, one president? Once elected, some will say there was rigging. And yes, there will be rigging. The person who is in government already has an advantage. The person who is not in government has to figure out how to be known and why people should know them. It's very difficult if I had to have a quiz and say, name these 107 parties. How many of us would pass the exam? Do you really think we'll pass the exam? I don't even remember beyond ZANU-PF, MDC, TMDC, that MDC, that PDP, that ZPP, that too many names, too many acronyms. And some you can just look at them and say, why even start the journey when you know that you don't have fuel? How many parties don't have fuel? How many of us talk but never think of actually putting our money where we think it ought to count? So this is where we are, 107, 38 years later, and we call it 107 political parties. what is it that we learn from this? Do we learn that people are tolerant? Do we learn people are patient? I think 4 political parties will be okay. We have only 5 million voters. You can say that, Ramai. But why is it that where common sense, reason, and logic dictates otherwise, sadly, people want to think otherwise? Yesterday, I met President Zuma, former President Zuma, and we were talking. And I made a number of observations that I will share with you some other day. But I said to him, imagine there was no government. How many of these people would be interested in serving the public? Imagine there was no government. And what would be the alternative? How would these 107 political parties survive? Some of them are given life to when it's about time to go for elections. After elections, there's something else. So I'd say to Dr. Zuma, former President Zuma, why don't we set up a university of common sense, a university of logic, a university of reason? Why? Because sense is not common. Logic is not logical. Reason is not reasonable. That there are many of us who simply stop thinking logically, who simply stop thinking reasonably, who takes sense and common and separate it. How is it that common sense is not common? And those who need sense actually believe they have the sense that is not common. So how do we build this future of promise when the people who surround us are not reasonable, are not logical, are not commonsensical? Politics and government is a source of income for the crooked. There is no sense and shame in them. And there must be some sense. How many people are attracted to these people who promise things that they can't deliver, who sometimes don't even know what government is, what a president does or should do or should not do? How many people are pervasively illiterate about power, yet they want more of it? And when they get it, they actually don't know how to use it. So what can we do to rescue ourselves from these suitors who, in numbers, want your trust? They don't have to earn it. They just want your trust. And they are saying, I am on the ballot box. If you choose me, goodbye, because I don't even know where to start. So, what do we learn? What lessons do we draw about the promise of independence? It produces absurd outcomes. It produces things that are uncomfortable. What is it that we need to do to secure the future that we think is deserving of our generation? What is it that we need to do? We need to continue to trust, to continue to have faith, and continue to repeat the same mistakes that have failed to produce the things that we want. What is it that you suggest? I leave it to you to think, apply your mind, and please tell us, what is it that we ought to do? What is it that we need to do to secure the future that we want? What is it? What is it that we have to do? What is it that you think in this, our generation, what is it that we need to do? So, from the looters, yes. So what is it that we need to do to secure the kind of future that speaks to our aspirations? What is it that we need to do? What do you think needs to happen to make sure that the people who ought to save us do save us? What is it that we have to do? Your voice on issues that matter is what we need to do. So please give us your comments, your insights. If you don't, then I have done my service to humanity. I have shared what I think are the important issues of our generation that we trust, and sometimes we don't verify. What is it that we need to do to be able to secure the kind of life, the kind of future that speaks to our generation? The future is in your hands, and you alone have the answers to the questions of the day. So please share your thoughts, share your insights. Never take anything for granted. So there's need to re-examine the governing system in the country, see where we are lacking, and then frame what is workable for our country. No man has your interest but self-interest. Don't trust anyone with power. There's no human messiah. I think Mugabe one-party state, because this problem is the coup, the coup opened up the floodgate to anyone to think they are now presidential material. Also, Zimbabwe is full of opinionated people like myself. Ramai, you have to have an opinion. But Ramai, just step back, think. It's expensive to associate. It's expensive to pretend to be together when you are going nowhere. Imagine you step into a bus without fuel with the hope of getting to point B. How do you get to point B when where you are is where you are? You need fuel, you need motion. How do you think 107 people looking for that pretty woman in a village, 107, some knowing actually they are going nowhere? What would make people associate, come together simply to have no motion? Good evening, Mambi. How are you? Good evening, Mushana. Ino Mawire, is the current system of government serving the interests of the society? Do we have the power to call the leaders when we feel that they have departed from serving the interests of the people? I'll give you a quiz. If somebody were to ask you to define and establish the difference between a pastor, a businessman, and a politician, what do you think the difference would be between the three characters who are all human beings? It's expensive to have people, Amtuma. You always say it. 107 political parties where the voters going to come from. They are all interested in being number one. Everyone sets up a political party to do something. So, what is it that would encourage, ignite, inspire people to be political actors? Take yourself into the mind of these political actors, starting with President Mugabe. Do you really think he would make a different choice today? If common sense was there, I would be the first one to resign and say, I failed my people. After 38 years, he's still angry But when the pain you see, the sorrow you see, hopelessness you witness of the people who started in 1980, full of promise, full of hope. And then he says, I want to determine the future president of Zimbabwe because I know what my people think and I'm their best representative. Imagine that President Mugabe does not know. And the more you stay in government, the less you know. So this is where we are. 107 political parties. No one told them that politics is about people, ought to be about people. A representative cannot be smarter than the person they represent, cannot have a plan that the people who send him into government don't have. We ought to be the people who remind some of these people. Some perfect their English, their Shona, their singing ability, to confuse, to bamboozle. And there is parties that represent like a matchstick. You put it in front of you and you hide behind it. You think no one will see you. How many of these parties don't have any reason to exist except the ego of the people who want the party to exist? Gugunyati, how are you? Rama, how much is the deposit for representing? I think they will have candidates, the parliamentary seats. I think it's harmonized election. There's a presidential seat, but I'm not sure whether there's any money paid for that purpose. But we need to ask them, why can't we journey together, find some of these political actors, list them, so that we list them and know them, name and shame them, bring them to the public square, so that we can begin to ask these questions. Perhaps we missed something the last 37 years plus a few months. Because President Mugabe never had to answer to anybody. So nobody could ask, why do you want to be retained in office? Imagine you say happy birthday, many happy returns to somebody who doesn't mean a thing to your life. How hypocritical we become. We actually don't know how to tell people to piss off. On a related note, what is the opinion of the people regarding the current electoral system? The winner-take-all system. Is it a viable system of governance in a country that is so diverse in terms of ethnicity and also political opinions? To me, this is a reincarnation of one-party state, which has proved not to be working in Zimbabwe. Why should we not move towards a more proportional representation, which I think is a more viable and inclusive system of government? Whatever system you put in, you can't substitute our foolishness, our stupidity to allow people with egos to confuse us. We are the people who, whatever system, as long as it represents your choice, it must be a good system. But how many of us are vigilant citizens? How many of us would rather step back, say nothing, do nothing, but expect more? Remember, if for MP or so, if you lose, you do not get your money back. Yeah, that's true. But how many people they will take their savings just to be on the voters' roll? I have a serious problem with people who think RGM was being forced to carry on. He's a 94-year-old of sound mind who thought and still thinks Zimbabwe is his to rule until God recalls him to dust. He thinks so because we have allowed him to think so. Because the people who staged the coup never did so because they differed with Mugabe on principle. They differed on who Mugabe was now fraternizing with. If Mugabe had remained loyal to the crew that he started with, he probably would be president until he dies. Let's have an abundance of options. When we go to polls, let's take plurality as an advantage. We need education. Because if we are fools, we get a foolish government. That we can't change. Because it is us who are authors of foolishness. And what we get is exactly what we put in. So, this is you. This is me. No government can rise above the genius, the smartness of the people who create it. It is always a people's government. But human nature is exclusive. It privatizes. And this is what we ought to know. So how do we survive ourselves? We survive by investing in knowledge. Mugabe was kept in a shell by his junta. He had no touch with reality and the regular Zimbabwean. Like everybody else, whoever assumes that position, Finley, it's not just Mugabe. Mugabe is just a human being like you and me. I can tell you it's raining where I am. How are you going to test it unless you come here? He is in shock because he's bubble burst. He can't fathom how people don't love him when he saw thousands at rallies, but they were bussed and forced. I don't know. We have come full circle. Whose government is it? Whose government do these people think they are saving? So on that note, I hope you have learned something. I hope there is something of value that I've shared. If you think it's not, the only polite thing is ignore me and you lose nothing. These are just views of one individual. One individual will not change the world. Nothing turns on it. But when ideas are shared, those who receive those ideas, they will benefit for themselves with the knowledge gained. Never trust any man with power. Never trust any man with power. However well-meaning, however well-educated, however, whatever, whenever, whosoever, please learn not to trust anyone with power, especially those who purport to borrow your power. So please, as you sleep, as you think, as you meditate, understand that a human being is a human being. There's nothing that we can do that will make us superhuman. We remain human beings. We remain ordinary. We remain what we are. And what we are is just mortal and fallible human beings. So 107 of these characters, trust none of them. You are better off just staying away from them. But when you interact with them, tell them that I don't trust you. So you have a job to do to earn my trust, earn my vote, earn my future. Because how many people whose aspirations were forward-leaning were put in reverse gear by Mugabe? And Mugabe thought he was going forward, but the gear was in reverse. And where was he looking? Into the rear view mirror, seeing the ghost of yesteryears. Who would advance himself by looking and using the rear view mirror? So this is the Zimbabwe that we don't want. So we don't need to trust anybody, Grace. Whether they get money from heaven, from donors, don't trust any man, especially those who believe that they are educated. They are entitled to rule you. Just be careful. Your life is not secure in the mind of an individual, because you are the individual. You are the driver of change. You are the deal. No one else can think like you, act like you, even make choices like you. So, Grace, whatever it is, trust but verify. Be skeptical, be cynical, be everything that another human don't expect. Let them earn your trust rather than you chanting slogans, becoming a vuvuzela for your own demise. So I do hope that we all have learned something. We need to be able to think, and think we must. So thank you very much. Our age just 6 minutes so that we stop at 10 o'clock on the dot. So I hope we all have understood what it is that we are talking about. Talking about the same future, contested future. No politician has ever been to the next second, leaving you in the previous second. We are all in it together. We need to understand that there is no one born with a better sense of what the future will hold. We are all human after all. So when you say 107 people, characters, dreaming, pontificating, imagining that because of our stupidity, they must be president. Because like everyone will wait until the next 5 years for us to be reminded what an election is. Forgetting that every day we must act like a customer looking for value. When I vote for you, I must know what I'm getting out of you. Thank you, Grace, for learning, because it is only literacy that can secure the future. It is only when we refuse to allow pop stars to urinate on us, and we call it politics, and they use state power to abuse your rights, and you excuse them and say, no, they will reform themselves. There is nothing like that. And a person who always navigates towards evil, towards selfishness, towards the undesirable, unless we keep reminding them of what their promise is, what our promise is. And that is where we are. Learn we must, think we must, act we must. But never fool yourself to think that you can trust another human being with power that is yours. So 2017, how many will be disappointed if the elections don't confirm what their egos inform? How many of us want to be number one? How many of us want to drive a bus when being a passenger allows you to sleep and wake up when the driver has taken you to point B? Why do we want all of us to be drivers? Imagine one bus had 20 steering wheels. Where would that bus go? Would it even leave the station? Why is it that we are not prepared to learn? And learn we must, that we are human after all. And as human beings, we need to be complementary. We need to be able just to be ordinary. Because ordinary people produce extraordinary outcomes. And it is us who define what tomorrow's character and personality will be. Because it is us who have the power to reason, the power to think, and the power to act on thought. It is us whose time is now. Not 107 characters who want to confuse us, promise us things they are not capable of producing, things no government has the power to produce. So on that note, as we say good night, please think. Think about why people are so interested in making you stupid, making you a voter, making you a political condom. So they throw you away after you do the job. So think carefully. Never trust any man with power. I leave you on that note. Good night.